Hello, everyone. Welcome to TBC, you and me. My name is Aparna Sood, and today we are going to talk about breaking out of the webs in life. Serious topic, but very interesting. Let me welcome our guest today, Bobbie Caskey, who is life coach and a business professional for 20 years and also worked in corporate training, project management, and relationship management. So definitely you're going to take something home today. Welcome to TBC, you and me, Bobbie. How are you?
Hey, I'm really good. I'm really excited to be on your show.
We are very excited to have you, to be honest. And I remember when we first talked, it was about breaking out of a rut. Tell us, what does that mean and why is it important?
Well, I think when at a really high level, when we talk about breaking out of a rut, we're talking about, being stuck somewhere, stuck in life and not able to get where we want to get or do the things we want to do. But at a deeper level, I find that when I work with clients who come and tell me, I feel like I'm in a rut, really what's occurring is they feel like they're kind of out of touch with their essential deeper self, their authentic self. They'll say things like, I feel like I'm off track, or I feel like my life looks great on paper, but I'm deep down not happy. So I think breaking out of a rut, kind of high level, is just being stuck, wanting to do something and being stuck.
Right.
And when I work with my clients, it usually goes a little bit deeper than that.
Right. So it is actually really true, because when we are thinking about it, we talk about, I'm stuck in work, relationships, so many things, but you're so right to say it's a bit deeper than that. And nobody ever cares what's that deeper thing. I'm hoping today we'll touch that. So tell us something about yourself, Bobbie. What do you do? How do you do it? And what do you want to do in life? Also, as you told me, what kept you in a rut for so long and how you came out of it?
Oh yeah. Okay, sure. Well, I'm a life coach. So I work with people one-on-one. I work with people pretty much anywhere in the world. I do my coaching sessions on Zoom. So they're just one-on-one Zoom sessions. I'm mostly working with people that are feeling like this, feeling like, my life looks great on paper, but it doesn't feel intentional. I feel in a rut. And that's where I was. So that's what I do. I'm a coach.
Right.
And I think your question was why was I in a rut for so long?
Yeah. What happened? It'll be great to know. And to be very honest, it'll be great to know a bit about what a life coach does. I mean, many people these days, they are life coach. But when we talk in our groups, many people don't know.
Yeah.
Why do we need them?
Oh, that's a great point. Absolutely. I'd love to talk about that. I think it'll become kind of, as I talk more about what kept me stuck in a rut, I think I'll touch on that too. But you're right. It is kind of hard to explain. Yeah. But I was in a rut for a long time. I think, why a lot of us are in a rut, and I'll speak to, which is the fear-based mind, the talk track of I'm not enough. Who do I think I am to want to do something like that? And there's multiple parts to this. So I think at a really basic level, what I never understood, because I don't think we're taught this, we don't get the manual on our mind, is that, there is a component of our mind that is solely dedicated to keeping us in our comfort zone.
Right.
Okay, so it's the fear-based mind, the primal mind, the lizard mind. And it was there originally, when we were in prehistoric times, to keep us safe. It would say, if I was about to leave a cave, it would say, hey, don't leave the cave. You're probably going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, right? Because I probably was, right? Yeah. So that part of our mind was really instrumental in keeping us alive as a human species. And I know I'm this seems kind of out, but I'm
yeah, that makes sense.
So that part of our mind is still with us. That part of us is still there. And it's sort of changed gears because we're not all as much focused on physical survival anymore. It's sort of shifted to our sense of self survival, the survival of the ego, of how we see ourselves. So anytime we consider going out of our comfort to do something, which is essentially, breaking out of out of a rut, working through the webs, however you want to say it. Whenever we're trying to do that, that part of our mind will automatically come up. And it's going to really, its whole job is to keep us where we are. Like, right. It doesn't want us to fail. It doesn't want us to be judged. So when we don't know this, because I certainly didn't know this till I was 40, when I hired a coach, when I started to do this work, we think it's us. So in other words, like, the talk track that so many of us have is like, I'm not enough. And that's probably one of the most effective ways the fear-based mind works. And if we don't know that that's our fear presenting itself, and it's biological, and it's, it's there for a reason, then we believe it's us. So I used to think, well, the fact that I have this talk track all the time, the fact that I always think about, like, I'm not good enough, and somebody's going to find me out. And because I have that talk track in and of itself, that means something about me.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like that in and of itself means I shouldn't be doing what I'm thinking about doing. Like, it's right. That voice is me. It knows me better than anyone.
Yeah. It's actually really relatable, because everyone out there is actually having that feeling in them that they want to get out of it, but there is an inner voice. Oh no, you're okay where you are. Who the hell do you think you are?
No, who do you think you are? Right. Yes. And so I feel like we don't really talk about that a lot. We say things like, be your own best friend, and, treat other, whatever. But it's like, until you really, at least how I work, I had to, once I really got it and understood it, that was the game changer for me. Because, and that's the whole work of a little bit of life coaching, is starting to put some space between the real, your real self, and some of those thoughts and understanding, because they don't really mean anything, but they are having consequences in our lives. That's the thing, because we don't understand them, because we don't talk about them, because we don't know how to work with them.
Right.
Because when we believe we are those thoughts, when we believe them, when we don't question them, they create emotions in us, like shame, fear. Fear is the biggest. And emotions are energy in motion, and you need energy to take action.
Right.
So it's like, it's basically like, we didn't get the manual. That's how I feel. Like, where was my manual?
Yes,
I didn't get it. And so there's like a scientific thing happening. There's like something that's creating this emotion that keeps us stuck, because that energy of anxiety and shame and all of that energy is not going to create the action we need to break out of a rut or kind of do the things we really want to do. It's going to create the energy that keeps us stuck. And then when we stay stuck, we make it mean something more about us, that we can't get out of it. And it's this vicious cycle. So my message is, man, it's amazing that we aren't all stuck all the time, because we don't know how it's working.
To be honest, there is another lot out there who might be stuck, but they don't admit it. So what triggered you that, okay, I'm stuck? So is there any, parameters or something that you can just look at and see, okay, I'm also in a web here and I need to get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a book I read that kind of started this whole process for me. And it was by Martha Beck, and it was called Finding Your Own North Star. And I've never heard this described better. So I'm just going to kind of borrow, quote her, where she talks about how we've got these two selves. We have our essential self, and she kind of explains that as, this is who we kind of come into the world as, like our natural gifts, our natural tendencies. Like, are we an introvert? Are we an extrovert?
Yeah.
What color schemes do we like? Just like who we are at our essence. So we have that essential part of us. And then everybody layered on top of that has a social self, which is like where we learn what all of the expectations are for us, how our culture works, just, everything we need to function in society. And it's not bad, but it's like, when that piece of us, the way she explains it, and this is what happened in my life and a lot of my clients, is when the social self is sort of like, she says, when the social self and the essential self are about even in your life, then you have balance and harmony and fulfillment. But when the social self ramps up and it's like completely overtaking things, meaning you're doing things for societal pressure, expectations of family, expectations of what you think you should do, your life doesn't feel like you anymore. That's when the essential self starts to make some noise.
Right.
Start to get these kind of inner nudges that I'm missing something. This isn't me. In my case, I was starting to get sick all the time. I mean, I was just, where I was when this all hit me was I had a really great job that I loved for a long time in corporate, but I was traveling, and it was a fairly demanding job, and I have 2 sons, I had 2 small kids, and I was trying to do what the expectations out there say of us, which is my house should look like Pinterest, I should be in great shape, my kids should be awesome, I should be the best at my job. And I was just starting to like crumble, to be honest. Like I couldn't, and the expectations I was putting on myself to be perfect and not fail. And really, like I was starting to just suffer health-wise, just sick all the time. And I was starting to get that inner nudge about like, hey, I think there's maybe something else I want to be doing, maybe, that should be doing, kind of that essential self coming up.
Right. So
yeah.
So you mean like, if you don't break out of these webs, you will actually face the repercussions mentally as well as physically?
I mean, I just don't think it goes away. I think that like, once you start to get that, I don't know what else to say, like a longing or a nudge, I think that it just sort of is like, it sticks around until you take action. Or sometimes we just cover it up like I did. I would like do late night shopping. I just didn't want to think about that. I didn't want to think about changes. I was too scared to make changes. So I just stayed, I just kept my mind on other things. But I do think eventually that's when people a lot of times will reach out to therapists or life coaches, so
yes.
To work through it. So
as you said that you used to like, if you want to just, take a break, you'll go for shopping or something like that. So can you share some steps with the viewers of how to break out of these webs in life where you're just stuck, how to break out of them? Any steps?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like the very first thing that's the most important thing to do is to start to notice what your mind's telling you. Like just to start to put a little distance between you and the thinking. So like you can even ask yourself, what am I most afraid of by making this change? And just starting to kind of inquire instead of letting the mind run and it go on default and it's very not empowering, right? So like starting to notice what your mind is saying is actually really, really empowering, because the truth is this part of our mind, this fear-based part, distorts reality all the time. So terrible things are going to happen and it doesn't, right? But it's really like getting aware of what your mind is telling you and realizing that all minds work like this. All minds produce fear to try to keep you safe, to kind of keep the species going. Like it's biological. So starting to get just a little bit of awareness, consciousness about that is so key. And then, if you know what changes in your life you're wanting, like one of the changes I wanted was a career change. Like, if you know already, which many of my clients do, they know what they want, but they feel stuck. Then the next step would be like really getting clear on why is it important to me? Like what values, what talents, what's it going to bring me? Or bring people in my life, getting really, really clear on that, because your mind is never going to default to that on its own. Never, ever.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because people have an excuse that I'm so busy. Like, I don't have time to think about this as well. So
Well,
this is
and I
like,
want to touch on
yeah,
that. It is true. I mean, I don't want to say, because I remember feeling like when I had my job and kids, I mean, it's real. The busyness is real, what we
yeah.
face. And I remember feeling that overwhelm, like, I don't have time to think about what I want to do. I don't have time to brush my teeth. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I will say that I want to acknowledge how busy we all are and how real that is. And I want to also say that it's usually also not the main thing that keeps us stuck. It's, it's a component, but the main thing is usually the fear of failing,
That's
like what we were talking
affected,
about.
you mean to say. Like, it might not be the most essential part of your life. We're just like stuck, but the inner things, the little things, you're stuck
Yeah,
there and they affect those big things.
right. And we are so busy in our life right now,
Yeah.
in our culture, in our society. There's no getting around that. So yeah, it
Okay.
is kind of easy to, and I did it for, I'll be honest, for years. Where I just didn't address it. I didn't deal with it. So for sure. So it's like when you really get to the point where you're ready to make change, or you really feel like I'm ready, that's when all of this comes into play. When
Right.
you're ready to do the work. And that's when coaches usually come into play. When you're ready to get like, I'm here, this is where I am in my life, and I really want to get somewhere else, but I feel stuck. That's where coaching comes into play. Because what coaching does is show you sort of what the blocks are.
Right.
Kind of, we can show you like what your mind's saying and how it's blocking you, and working through it. So
Right.
so if you already know like what you want to be doing, like, but that you're not doing now, you start to make a case for it in your mind. Like, start to make a case for why it's important, because your mind's going to put up all these other defenses.
Right.
If you're not sure, if you just know you're not happy, there's a question I give my clients, which is to sit with and think about and journal, which is, if anything were possible, what would you create in your life and work? Like, if anything were possible, what would you create? And just let it be like, don't put any parameters on it. Just write or think about it, and that's going to give you some clues.
I guess this is very hard for some people to actually accept what they really want, because there are so many things in their head. That's not possible.
That's
Why am
not
I even
possible.
thinking about it?
Right. So you just give yourself a little room. Like, I'm just going to give myself 10 minutes to play. It doesn't mean anything else. I'm just going to give myself a little time to be free with it. And that's
Yeah.
it. It doesn't mean anything more than that. I'm just going to sit with it.
Right.
Knowing that your mind, and this is where the empowerment comes in, knowing your mind's going to tell you no. It's going to. That's going to do that, right?
Wow. Yes.
And the third thing that I haven't touched on, but that's really important, is getting ahead of the failure piece. So something happens, at least in my life and what I see with my clients, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but when we're kids and we're just trying to figure stuff out, and we mess it up, and we tried a bunch of different ways, like we fail all the time, even walking, right? Just keep going. So something happens as adults, especially if you're like a lot of my clients, like high achievers, been really successful. It's like failure becomes this bad. And for me, I was absolutely doing anything in my life to avoid failure. I made living under the radar an art form. I didn't want to fail. So failure is like this terrible thing, and that's part of what the fear-based mind is trying to keep you from, right? Failing. And I viewed it, and I think a lot of us view it as something permanent. If I fail, it's going to mean something permanent about me and my ability to live the life I want. So for example, I was working with someone who really just wanted to start a blog and like, I think, a cookbook, but she couldn't put out the first blog. And what was stopping her was, like, what if it's not, like, at a subconscious level, right? This is what we found, right? That if I put this first blog out and nobody reads it, it's going to mean it's never going to work. I'm not going to be able to do this, right? Like, and so that's all happening at a very subconscious level, right? But I would think of like running for office, like a student council, and then I would be like, but what if I fail? And then I knew, even back then, I knew that my internal talk track was just going to beat me up, if I lost. such a bad experience, right?
Yeah.
So it's just goes back to this awareness. So if before you start, you can say, hey, like logically, we know failing is part of the game. Nobody starts something and is perfect. Nobody.
Right.
So there's no way I would be able to have my own business if I hadn't taken these steps. I would have been dead in the water a long time ago because I failed so much on the regular. So it's this process of taking back the dialogue, right? And being like, okay, so what? If I put something out there and it doesn't work, so what? It's part of the process. So it's like redefining failure ahead of the time.
But do you think that when people are afraid of failure, is it because of inner fears, or is it because of the societal image that they want to maintain, the fear of damaging that societal image?
Oh yeah, that's exactly it. Because that's what the fear-based mind is trying to protect. Like since it doesn't have to worry as much about our physical self, it's trying to preserve that the sense of self we have, the image that we portray to the world. Right. And when we don't, it feels like a little death, when we get a hit to our ego. It is really hard.
It is. Right? It is. Yeah. Really when that hits, fun. Yeah. I mean, as a life coach, if I tell you that, okay, this is a situation, so what should I say to myself that, okay, I am conscious. I don't want my friends to be like, oh, you failed or something like that. I don't want that image to be distorted. So what should I tell myself that keeps me up? It's all right. I'm going to do it.
That's such a good question. I think it's different for everybody, but I think usually when people start to, I'm like putting my two hands up as like a scale. When people start to get ready to risk that, the image, everything you just said, to take a step out of their comfort zone, it's because the negativeness on the other side has finally outweighed it. Like they're so tired of dealing with, it's finally like the scales tipped. Like I'm gonna risk showing myself because it's the other side. I can't do it anymore. Like it's worth the risk. I'm gonna do it. And so I think that's what happens with everyone. And I would just say that if you can, before you start to take action, show yourself the compassion that you deserve for doing something brave, doing something that people may not understand. And that knowing that it may take you a few times. Like that's just,
yeah.
The other thing is, no matter what, people are going to judge you. I think this was one of the biggest things for me, because it was like, I would do things and be like, when I was trying to stay in the lines, and then I would find out people were, because we all judge. I mean, it's just human nature, right? And then when I started my coaching business, there were people in my life that I never expected to be supportive that were. It's like, no matter what you do, people are going to have thoughts, judgments. You really can't control it. You actually can't control it. So you might as well just do what you really, really want and be who you really, really are, because you can spend your whole life, I mean, and I can speak from experience, trying to make sure everybody thinks a certain way of you. And it's like banging your head against the wall. There's no real way to do it. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. So. You said a very beautiful thing there, that have a little bit of compassion for yourself. So do you think like it's possible, because it's easier said than done? And I can say, I want to show compassion to myself, but then I'm like, what? Like my fears are always like, over there, that, okay, you don't be that positive person and save what you have instead of going for what you don't.
You know what I used to do? Is I would pull up an image of myself as like a kid.
Okay.
I would think of her, and I would think, I don't want to let her down.
That's so beautiful. That makes sense. Yes.
In terms of self-compassion, right? Because that child is still in all of us, right? And like, what would you say to her? Would you say like, don't bother trying to live a full life?
Oh, that's beautiful. I can actually imagine it. Yes.
can be pretty emotional.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, that's what I did. I mean, and I could see her. And because when we're young, we are willing to take those risks and we are ourselves and we are our authentic self. And so I really just tried to, it's a really easy way to get back in touch because that's all still there.
Right. Right. So, tell me something, Bobbie. What is the most important thing that a person needs to have for breaking out of the rut in their life, these webs in their life?
It's really so good. To me, it's like getting a real understanding that you're not your fear.
Right.
That you aren't your fear. There's actually a great book called The Untethered Soul.
I've heard of it.
I'm blanking on the author. But just starting to get some space between you and the voice, the I'm not enough voice, because at its core, that's what's stopping us. That's the biggest thing that stops us. And so starting to really gain some awareness of what's going on and understanding that this happens to everyone. And it's just learning a strategy to work with it. Because then when it's not us, when we're like, if it's us, then it's like, well, that's just who I am. I'm not somebody that can take risks. I'm not somebody that can disappoint people. I'm not somebody, right? But when we learn it's just sort of biology and there's ways to work through it, which is what coaching is. That's what coaching is. And, then everything seems more manageable. So I would say that work, and then taking like at a really simplest format, taking really, really small steps, because like the overwhelm, when we say like, I don't know where to start, that is also a tactic of the fear-based mind to keep us stuck. So because when I wanted to change careers, it was like, it was,
I know, yeah.
health insurance, money, like it was so overwhelming. So that it can easily keep you stuck. So I would say one of the biggest things is, what's a small step that your brain won't freak out about? For me, it was like, I'm just going to go buy that book by Martha Beck, and I ended up going to her coaching school. But like, it was just like buying, what's one small thing? Don't think of the end game or everything you have to do. Just what is one small step? Because then your mind will play nicer. It will allow you to take action. And then when you're in that step, the fear-based mind usually isn't there as much. Like when I'm reading my book, which was my first step, that got my creative juices going, right? That the fear-based kind of went to the corner a little bit. So those small steps, like your mind will try to tell you, why bother? It's not going to help. You know what I mean? I think that's all happened to all of us. Like, why? Like that happens to me with workouts. Why work out today? I'm going to work out tomorrow. It's the same thing. So it's like, what's just to outsmart it a little bit, right? Like, what's one small thing I can do where my brain won't get all worked up?
Nice. Oh, that's interesting.
It's just a matter. This is what I want to say to your listeners. It's all learnable. It's all doable. You totally have what it takes to do the thing you want.
So it's like, have the hunger in you to get it.
Yeah, if you really want, like if you have a real desire to do something, there's a way to work through all the mental blocks.
Yeah. Right? To be honest, I guess this question really comes in my head as well. Like, when I'm sitting and doing my work, that is it life is about this, like, when you're just working, sleeping, waking up, and the same routine goes on and on and on. Or there is something more to it. I guess when you realize that's something more, that's when you start enjoying your routine.
Right. When you're doing things that light you up, you know, and it's not, nothing like, even in my work that I love and it means so much to me, there's parts of it that there's things in the business that I do that I don't love. I think that's always going to be there, but I think it's just about the work I'm passionate about is just helping people live as an authentic life, like a life that feels meaningful and fulfilling to them, not what society expects, not what their family of origin expects, just really what they, what's meaningful for them.
Right. I would like to just, connect this topic to happiness. Now, happiness is very subjective, right? Mm-hmm. But do you think that if a person can break out of the webs in their life and just, be free, will they be more happier? What's your experience?
I think so. I think that, I do think that that's definitely for me been, I'm just a more, I would say, joyful person because I'm doing more things that I enjoy
Right.
and that I love. But it's not like an all or nothing,
Yeah.
there's edges and flows, but I do. But, there's this book by Bronnie Ware, and she called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And she was a hospice nurse for a long time. And so she worked with patients right before they were going to go home.
Right.
To die. And so the number one, so she wrote a book about all the things she learned, all the things they talked about. So the number one regret was, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me.
Wow. True.
And that's not easy. There's
Not
all
easy.
kinds of cultural messages. There's all kinds of, maybe you're going against something your family taught you when you were young, that this wasn't, maybe you don't think you're being responsible, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I believe that is the whole game. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, can we live lives being true to ourselves? And I think that's what leads to happiness. Right.
Breaking the webs and just like be free and be who you are.
Right. Easier said. there's a method, there's a method to it. Right. Just like learning the steps, knowing that you can, but it's not, it's not just an easy thing. I mean, there's lots of posters about it, like be yourself, but there really isn't a lot of, this is how to do it.
So true. Yeah, I always say this, that people will tell you be happy. Nobody tells you how to be happy.
Right.
Yeah, that happens. So as you were mentioning, Bobbie, I must say that many people are actually dying to get off their jobs, but they don't, because they are, in a fear. And that's obvious. That's understandable for everyone.
Absolutely.
So what, according to you, is a successful life? Is it about the job, or maybe your family life, or is it about you?
I don't, it's so different for everybody, but for me, it's really been about balance. It's been about, you know what, you get to decide what success means to you. Our society is definitely going to tell us one thing, but
so true.
I think for me, and that's part of the work, like, what does it mean for you, right? Like, you get to decide. So for me, it's been about being more present with my kids, doing work that means, a lot to me, feeling inner peace, not carrying grudges, not, that kind of stuff. So for me, it's those things, but everybody really gets to decide that. Like, that's actually a coaching question I ask. What is success? What does it mean to you?
Right. It's very subjective. Yes. So I was just thinking, because everyone will actually answer this on the basis of their experiences, their life. But is there any tangible definition to put it out there? Okay, this is it. But I don't think there is.
I don't think so. I just think I just think it's so individual, right? I mean, we all get the messaging. So depending on what family you were raised in, what culture, you're going to have those messages about what success, what happiness looks like.
Yeah.
Don't always align to us as individuals, right?
So true. Do you think social media plays a role in stopping us to break out of our webs?
So it's such a mixed bag. I mean, I use it in my business. I think that there's a lot of really good things about it. It connects people that wouldn't be connected. I think the number one thing that maybe negative that comes out of it is the compare and despair. Like, I'm not where I should be, or this person's already doing what I want, so I don't want to do it. I should be further along. That kind of like, I'm not, that we just call it in coaching, compare and despair, which is so normal. I mean, that happens to me when I'm on social media too.
Of course.
So I think that's the thing to be aware of with that, is that like, we all have our own path. Success, is what it means to me. Everybody has different timing. It's hard out there, with social media, that can add to that component.
So there is no way actually to get rid of that despair, as you just talked about, the comparison despair, but you have to just change your psyche about it. Is it?
Well, I think it's like, what I know is that a lot of times it's a highlight reel. A lot of times, it's not our full lives being shown. There's always some things
of course
going on beyond the scene, right? So it's like, it's taking, for social media, what I do is I focus on the benefits, like how can I reach people? How can I connect with people? And then like I said before with the mind, I'm trying to be aware of when I start to fall into the, oh gosh, look how many followers this person, look how great this person's doing. We just all have our own path.
As you said before as well, be aware of what's going on in your head.
That is my main message, right? Like, and that's how we start to kind of get more confidence and feel more empowered, is when our mind's not running us, we're running it.
Right. So is it like being more mindful, as these days people are just talking a lot about mindfulness and ways to just achieve that mindfulness, focusing on things and stuff like that. So do you think once a person can actually do it and achieve that mindful state where they're just focused on one thing, so they know what's going on?
I think that no matter what, negative thoughts come.
They do.
No matter what you're doing. I just think, I think about it like, I heard somebody say once, our heart pumps blood, our lungs pump air, and there's a part of our mind that pumps negative thoughts.
Right. Okay.
So it's like, and so I think it's just starting to be like, when you start to be aware of them, like, okay, my mind just told me I'm never going to be as successful as this person. Well, is that true? Like, it's just, then you would know why you're feeling a certain way too. Like, you would have more understanding of that. So I think it's really just more creating a different relationship with those thoughts, like kind of like going back to the self-compassion, understanding of yourself, that these thoughts are going to be produced and they really don't mean anything about you unless you buy into them and aren't aware of them.
Right. Oh, well, now we are reaching the end of our show, Bobbie. It was so good. But what message would you like to give away to our listeners and viewers before we end today's show?
I would just say, you have the ability to do whatever you are cut out for, the thing that you really, really want to do. If you want to do it, that you are not your fear.
Wow. Brilliant. That's so nice. And I'm hoping that all of us, including me, we learned a lot today with Bobbie. And thank you so much, Bobbie, for coming to the show. And definitely, I'll be coming up next week, guys, with another show. And definitely, if you want a life coach, contact Bobbie. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.